U.S. Admiral Arthur Sabrowski is the creator of the doctrine whereby the guiding role of the Pentagon and similar entities is not only to capture natural resources but control the access of other countries to those essential resources. For this chaos that only the U.S. Armed Forces is able to confront must be performed. This, among other things, explains what has happened in the great Middle East in the last years. Particularly, let's look at the Arab Republic of Syria, where thousands of lives have been lost. Nevertheless, in that country that has shown resistance and accompanying missions of solidarity directly involved in the combat to terrorism agree that only weeks are away from the end of the war. The displaced people are returning while the government is preparing to rebuild the infrastructure and economic reactivation so necessary for daily life. Will the United States allow it? Will it assume its military and strategic defeat? Who is in charge of paying the destruction? What is the role of the UN Security Council? Europe, Israel, Kurdish separatism, what role do they play? The end of the war in Syria shows a fragmented land. Syria, a peace key in the Middle East, a critical move today. Let's look at the last events and how forces are correlated. We'll start. United Nations Press Service informed last Friday that its special envoy Ye, by the end of a meeting with its Chinese peer, assured that there is no great-scale confrontation on the field, which leads us to cautious optimism. He says we are going to the end of a great military conflict, although in these cases there are always risks. Like in January 19, de Mistura would have to turn in his position, and by the end of December he will present the summary of the situation before UN Security Council. European nations solidarity with Syria agreed that Syria is about to victory against terrorism. We don't have the least doubt that imperialism wanted to destroy Syrians for Israel to impose its power and destroy the Palestinian people. The struggle we saw yesterday is the same as today. Therefore, the Syrian people continues the Palestinian people's struggle. This visit is very important for us because we want to address a message to all the countries of the European region that it's time, even if it's late, to change the hostile attitude that they have had against Syria. Stability has been established, and this is why I'm returning, and I urge our refugees to come back and help rebuild the country. We have built very difficult situation as refugees. I am very happy. After 7 years of living as a refugee far away from my parents, my family, I come back to serve my country. And with these testimonies, our home house informs that thousands of refugees turned back to Syria in the last 24 hours. According to the Russia refugee shelter, 1357 from Lebanon and 580 in Jordan came back. This only in the last 25 hours. Then we go to Voltaire Network. Recommendation is intervene transnationals to rebuild Syria by Thierry Messin, French intellectual, president of and founder of Voltaire Network. Who has to pay is not Washington, but the people and multinationals directly involved in the war. An example of this is the U.S. fund, KKR, belonging to Henry Combs. KKR, among has David Petros, former CIA director, among its employees directly involved in Syria, who participated in sending funds to Al-Qaeda and Daesh. Another one is Toyota, car manufacturer, who provided equipment, and Caterpillar that sent the machinery for the construction of the tunnel construction. And what about Farts Holstein cement manufacturing that produced 6 million tons of used cement to build bunkers of jihadists? This is what we have selected from the press, online press, and we're going to look at other elements. We have decisive days in Syria before starting the year of the rebirth, reconstruction of the devastation in the war. The return of refugees is essential. Russia has been a key actor, and this is why we're going to transfer to Moscow with our correspondent, Hansel Oro. You have data to contribute to this time. Greetings. Russia continues with its efforts to reach peace, to carry peace to Syria. This is the work that the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia are performing to seek the return of refugees to each of its homes. What happened last October 15, which is the opening of contact line in the Syrian conflict of Enclave, upon the condemnation made by Russian President Putin and Turkish President Erdogan to reach a content between the opponent forces. Internationally, all provocations made by terrorist groups inside the country with the help of the white helmets to find military justification and justify the cruise missiles in the Mediterranean. The economic reconstruction is a key matter at the time of talking of peace process in Syria. All of the coordinations between the different ministries of economy in Russia, as well as provincial coordination as the Syrian province Tatak with the Crimea Russian province to seek transportation of input and also to take infrastructure in that country. On the other hand, Russia has called the different fora and Astana and the Russian city of Sochi to seek this direct contact between the political forces of Syria, especially upon the coordinations that are the important points in the Congress of National Dialogue of Syria. Thank you, Hansel. Syria is about to reach complete victory against terrorism and hegemonic imperial interests. What factors and actors has made this possible? We leave this question to answer after this pause.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South. Weekdays. Only on Telesur. Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Siria, enclave de paz en el Gran
Peace
Oriente Medio.
in the Middle East is our critical move today. We're going to review two important news we have in the Syria News Arab Sanam. Syrian army seizes U.S. and Israel weapons, missiles, anti-tank, 23 14 millimeter weapons, communication means, raw vehicle, medicines, Israeli equipment, U.S., Israeli, and British equipment are only some of the seized equipment by the Arab Syrian army. According to government troops, the weapons reserves were concealed by terrorists to prevent returning them to the Syrian Arab army before leaving to the north. The Syrian government has also found in the border with Jordan a tunnel full of Israeli and U.S. weapons used by terrorists. I will stay in Sana, this agency news, and read another information. Syria condemns illegal excavations by U.S. forces in areas under its occupation. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and migrants of Syria has condemned archaeological illegal excavations performed by U.S. French forces in Manbij, Afrin, and Deir Raqqa and other areas under their occupation. These activities are a new war crime that are added to those committed against the Syrian people, its history, culture, and civilization. In the last phases of the war, we have the dialogues of Geneva, Switzerland, Astana, Kazakhstan, and Russia, with the participation of Russia, Turkey, and Iran in search for a peaceful solution. They call these zones distension zones, where they have reduced confrontations between terrorists and Syrian army and have facilitated the return of Syrian refugees to their homes. What about from here behind? We have to look behind to look at the origins of this war. After uninterrupted 8 years of war, more than 460,000 Syrians have died and 12 million have been displaced. When they started some protests against President Bashar in Iraq to the south, soon armed groups started organizing, and government forces started adding to these irregular groups. Combats were multiplied until they arrived to Damascus and Aleppo, the second most important city. The armed groups received weapons from Qatar and Saudi Arabia, while the government received the assistance from Iran, Pakistan, and Iraq. Terrorists like Front al-Nusra, affiliate of Al-Qaeda in Syria, and the self-proclaimed Islamic State in June 2014, and then near the Iraqi border, Islamic State proclaimed a caliphate in the area controlled near El Raqqa, composed by thousands of foreign terrorists that attacked the government. Al-Nusra, with which it made alliance, and Kurdish forces opposed al-Assad. In September 2014, an international coalition led by United States, Jordan, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates, France started their attacks in 2015, and Russia finally entered and changed the coalition of forces in favor of al-Assad. On April 4th, chemical weapons caused at least 86,000 deaths in Zaytsakoum. The opposition of the United States and other countries accused the attack of Damascus, but Russia denied this. They were keeping chemical weapons. On April 6-7, Washington bombarded 56 Tomahawk missiles al-Taidat in the province of Homs against the Zaytsakoum chemical attack.
El pasado 30 de
Last
septiembre
September
se cumplieron 3
30th,
años
it was
del
3
inicio de la
years
participación de las fuerzas
since the
rusas en
beginning of the
territorio
Russian
sirio a petición
participation
del
on
Ejecutivo
Syrian
liderado por
territory
Bashar
at the
al-Assad.
request of
Transcurrido
Bashar
ese
al-Assad.
lapso, ¿qué números
After
permiten
this
describir la situación?
period, what
De
numbers
eso va
describe the
nuestro mapeo de la
situation?
jugada crítica
Our
y les
mapping
dejo
of
solo un
critical
dato como
move
punto
will
de
only
partida
leave you
para que
one
hagamos los
data as a
comparativos.
starting
Cuando
point
la
to
operación
compare.
conjunta
When the
comenzó,
joint
apenas
operation started,
8% del territorio
barely
estaba
8% of the
controlado por las
territory
fuerzas
was controlled by
gubernamentales
government
sirias,
Syrian
y
forces
92%
and
restante en manos de
92% in the
terroristas
hands of
y grupos
terrorists and
armados.
armed
Veamos
groups.
ahora cómo
Let's
está la
see now
situación.
how the situation is now.
Según fuentes oficiales
According to
sirias, hoy
official Syrian
96,5%
forces,
del territorio está bajo el control de
96.5%
fuerzas
today is
gubernamentales
under
y
the
milicias
control of
populares.
government
Apenas
forces and local
3,5%
militias.
controlado por
Barely
grupos terroristas en la zona de
3.5% are
distensión
controlled by
Idlib, en la región
terrorists
noroeste
in
del país.
Idlib.
Los altos del Golán
The
siguen
Golan
bajo
Heights
ocupación
continue to
ilegítima
be
de Israel.
legitimately
En
occupied
total,
by Israel.
1.411 localidades han sido
1,411
recuperadas del
localities
accionar de
have
los
been
terroristas.
recovered from terrorists. 6,533 hectares have been demined that are discriminated as follows.
2.319 en Palmira, 2.956 en
Palmyra,
Alepo y
Alepo,
1.238 en Deir ez-Zor.
and Deir ez-Zor.
108.896
108,896 explosive objects were neutralized, and 30,724 homemade 19,000 buildings and 2,000 kilometers of roads. The support from international actors were 63,012 Russian military troops. One of every 4 has received military honors for heroic and solitary work. Air Force has performed 39,000 combat flights and the Army 189 combat missions. For the first time in history, in 2016, Russia attacked land targets from aircraft carrier Admiral Kazakhstan and decommissioned 86,000 terrorists. 2,518 localities adhered to the truce. The destruction of more than 121 terrorist targets, 970 camps, 20,513 bases of operation, 9,941 arms and fuel stores, 649 tanks, 781 armored infantry vehicles, and 9,000 improvised combat vehicles.
Bueno, nos dan a continuación su visión de las cosas desde España.
We will now contact from Spain Fides Al-Sarani, international analyst, and José Antonio Fido, also international analyst, both from Spain. Welcome, both for being with us. So I'd like to start with you, José Antonio. How do you see the situation, and what will happen? Will really be an end of hostilities in all the national territory? What will happen with the zones that are occupied by U.S. troops? First of all, good afternoon, and I would like to welcome Dr. Fides Al-Sarani, who's a veteran collaborator of Telesur. You have to welcome him, but for me it's a very an honor to have him as a peer here. The U.S. has experience in Afghanistan. They've been occupied in that Asian country for 19 years. And what they pretend is to extend indefinitely the occupation, especially over oil zones, because they don't want to acknowledge their defeat by the Syrian people and government, president, and by its army that has, this year, 2018, has accumulated very important victories, not only in the defeat of terrorism, but also in the reconciliation of the country and the start of curing wounds in this absolutely atrocious war that was started under the strategic direction of the United States and financing of some states. Oil Arab states, but that must end with a reconstruction of the country, with the expulsion of foreign illegal forces that does not include Russia or Iran, that are legally there with due authorization of the legitimate government of Syria that administers the Syrian sovereignty. It is the Turkish troops, unless there is agreement with the Syrian government, U.S. troops and French troops that are supported the so-called Democrat Syrian forces are illegal in zones where Syria has its oil wealth in a threat to the peace in the region against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the non-recognition that the plans operate in 2011 to defeat the Syrian government, to destroy Syria, as they did with Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, have failed completely due to the resistance of the Syrian people and, of course, the saving introduction of Russian armed forces that acted at the request of the Syrian government. We must not forget the intervention of the United States that are responsible for Islamic State and other terrorist groups has nothing to do with the saving intervention of the Russian Federation. I would like to now ask Dr. Fide Sancharani, international analyst, and ask your vision agrees with this European delegations, even actors involved in conduct of terrorism, that say that Syria is at portas of a final victory?
Buenas tardes desde Valencia, España, y saludo a Telesur y a todo el
Good afternoon from Valencia, Spain.
de Venezuela.
I would start by saying something, that this war has 8 years, and while many people can analyze the situation, we can reach many conclusions. Of course, everything was prepared, and what they pretended was to control the zone, its wealth, and perhaps one of the most important things is the security of the Israeli state. The war is about 90% won, but until the province of Idlib is not free, which I think is a key matter here, then U.S. troops and Kurdish troops is an easy thing that is not significant at strategic level. I'll go back to Jose Antonio. I think we were talking about this together in a former critical move. We said that the United States recently was sending more cruise missiles, white phosphorus. It was even accused together with the UK's intelligence servant, a mortal chemical agent to kill President al-Assad. If we are so near to victory, what can we infer from the U.S. action with what it has done historically? Well, the United States, as I said, does not want to recognize their defeat. And in fact, we see different positions between General Mates, called Crazy Dog, by the way. It's not an insult. That's how he is known in the U.S. press. He is the Defense Secretary of the United States. He wants to extend indefinitely the illegal presence of U.S. And some declarations of President Trump who would like the quickest withdrawal possible. In the end, what there is are discrepancies between big economic power groups. Mr. Mates represents the industrial military complex that wants war scenarios to invoice death machines, all kinds of weapons that the U.S. Army has for the companies to continue producing and selling them. And then Mr. Trump, who represents other economic interests that tend more to have commercial relations with Russia and other interests. Of course, there there is Israel that is playing, making much pressure. And there is uncertainty in the aggressive bloc because this resistance that they could not foresee in 2011 has caused in the world in regional geopolicy collateral damages, we're going to call them like that. The fact that Turkey also painfully for the United States has somehow approached Russia and even Iran, that Qatar has been expelled from the bloc formed by Saudi Arabia and other of its allies, enemies of Syria. The fact that Russia is now an essential actor of the world policy, and some other elements that, of course, cause fear and concern, that leads to the United States to take preventive measures to avoid a great victory of the resistance front. And I will give you an example. There is a zone in Syrian territory occupied by the United States called Antanaf, desert, which is part of a direct line that links Iran, Baghdad, Damascus, and Lebanon. The United States has an obsession for interrupting that line military, that line that links the Arab and Irani countries, majoritarily Muslim countries, that would be part of the front of resistance and the reconstruction of a new order which that tends to peace and stability, because besides the recent intervention of Russia this year by delivering missiles and missile systems SS-300 to Syria, has neutralized Israeli practice of launching missiles and aviation impunely against Syrian territory from the deployment of these Russian anti-air arms now in the hands of the Syrian army. There is a fundamental element has been stopped, Israel, and now they are living a complete victory in front of resistance that will give stability to the region and weaken the forces that have led to this war and devastation, terrorism, that I think that if it weren't for Russia, they would still be devastating or European cities and continents like Africa, what happened after the victory of the U.S. in Libya and Iraq, the extension of terrorism and all kinds of geopolitical disgrace. Thank you, José Antonio Firas. Now I would like to ask French author Thierry Messon believes that multinationals have actively participated in applying this doctrine conceived by Arthur Zabrowski to destroy states and societies in the Middle East countries, and they have done it because they probably were convinced that they, under the protection of traditional Western armies, they would have access to natural resources that region has that are significant. Who has to pay the reconstruction of all those devastated zones, and what has been the role of multinationals? I would continue what Professor Ejido just said, which is the struggle of the assistance front that links Iran with south of Lebanon. And I will insist on the security of Israeli state, self-proclaimed State of Israel, and the importance they have to protect it from the United States. From the war of 2006, they have not been able to progress in the south of Lebanon, and since they are bringing their tanks as flies in south of Lebanon, those who penetrated in the territory, Isagal said something very famous at that time, talk of a new Middle East and talking about constructive chaos. They were talking about 2007, where they invaded 7 countries of the zone. They wanted to reach a conclusion, to reach Iran, passing by Syria, destroy it as a state, since it is anti-US and anti-Israel, anti-Zionism. And all the problem comes from there, and everything that has occurred in 8 years. I must emphasize on one important thing, and what happens in Syria, conversations of Astana, and talking about the new Syrian constitution. What they pretend is to make Syria a failed country, since the Iraqi constitution and what happened in Lebanon make a state where each ethnic group and each religion has its political party, and this is not the plan of the Syrian government. The constitution respects every citizen because of their religion or ethnic group, and in Syria we have lived in peace during many centuries. Therefore, both Turkish and French are using this charter in the province of Idlib. Of course, the Syrian government, since the liberation of Aleppo, has been the industrial capital of the country, and started the deconstruction in zones controlled, peaceful zones where there is no military or civil instability. Therefore, in the industrial zone of Aleppo is already almost 50% rebuilt, and the last budget of the Syrian government has more than 70% appointed to the construction of the country and for social matters, humanitarian aid, because of the displacement of so many people who lost their homes. If military progress is not achieved, I think finally there will be a battle in Idlib, because Turkey is playing its cards to the last moment. Russia knows it, and Syria too. The moment this zone is freed, where the West will use all its Machiavellic force, as they did in Aleppo, to support the terrorists, most of them Chinese or from Uzbek or other countries that are looking for Syrian prosperity. Therefore, according to Syrian president, the country's prosperity, there will not be the participation of countries that have used forces to destroy it, and that Syria has enough resources to rebuild it, and only China can use it. The money from the West or the companies from the West are not welcome in Syria. This is, of course, a political decision, and the Syrian parliament and president must decide, but reconstruction is not the problem. The problem today is making a well-protected constitution, so no Islamists participate in the parliament, for Syria not to step back in social rights, and we continue living in peace. Correlation is complex and diverse. What do Western powers, United Nations, play in Syria? Will the Syrian peace be the peace of the region? We will take a pause now. We will take a pause right now at Critical Move.
Decíamos, en el caso sirio la correlación de fuerzas es diversa y compleja. En el tablero sirio, las grandes potencias se juegan lo suyo, cuotas de poder e influencia en la región.
El diseño de un nuevo orden favorable a los neoconservadores, anunciado y puesto en práctica ya desde la administración Bush, contaba con premisa de la nueva globalización un rediseño completo del Medio Oriente en lo que se llamó el Nuevo Medio Oriente, que en palabras de Michel Leading, asesor teórico neoconservador estadounidense, concebía una reconfiguración de nuevas alianzas,
had included new alliances, energy policy, and a favorable agenda to the United States, UK, and Israel. According to this author, controlled chaos was needed for a creative destruction due to the existence of great oil reserves in the zone, and the Pentagon was based on the Kurdistan, Syria, Iran, and Turkey. The results are in sight: millions of war refugees, high-intensity refugees and conflicts that includes all Western powers. What they did not foresee was that the U.S. hegemony in the zone was questioned and that Russia would become a definitive power by filling the gap in imperial forces. Russia and its influence in the Mediterranean has a stable base in Syria. It positions its weapons industry and has its own energy project, earning the trust of old allies. Nevertheless, the end of the conflict in Syria does not mean peace. It threats with operating militarily in the Lebanon in search for Hezbollah. Hezbollah has refused those tunnels and say that Israel is planning using its armed forces that would lead to a more important conflict in the region. Jose Antonio, you were saying at the beginning that, in your opinion, the United States is interested in extending the war, as happened with other countries in the region like Afghanistan, because it does not want to recognize its strategic military defeat by the Syrian forces and allied forces, namely Russia. I would like to ask you if you agree with what we were saying. U.S. hegemony, especially, is questioned upon the arrival of Russia as a political actor. There is no doubt that in that strategic region of the world, because of the large amount of hydrocarbon resources, and because it is the platform of control of what obsesses U.S. strategist, the control of Eurasia. So the position of the United States in 2018 is a lot more complex and frail than it was in 2011, since what we see in the north of the Middle East, even if Turkey has not formally broken with NATO, of which it is member, a military structure under U.S. conduction. The strategic turn of Turkey for foreign policy is evident, is a matter of concern of the Pentagon. We have mentioned Qatar's rupture with the rest of its allies. We have mentioned the difficulty that Israel has in imposing its impune attacks upon Syria. And we also have to mention the situation of significant internal crisis of the Kingdom of Saud, great strategic ally, because the United States had three essential allies in the region: Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. The three are weakened as a result because the plans have not come out as U.S. wished. The idea plan for the United States was that by 2018-19, the terrorists would have taken power in Damascus, crushed the progressive movement, murdered President Bashar al-Assad, and terrorist fronts, barbarian and criminal terrorist fronts, would be destabilizing the Caucasus under Russian influence, States and the Chinese province of Xinjiang with Chinese Turkish terrorists trained in Syria. Because I mentioned what happened in Africa after the destruction of Libya and the destruction of Iraq, the increase of terrorist groups and the multiplication of terror scenarios. This has not happened because of the palpable victory of Syria and its allies, Russia, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this is very good news for peace in the world. This is no doubt. We have one more actor. When we always describe these scenarios, we want to include, which is United Nations. We had an information here by Sergei Lavrov in United Nations in October 2017. The UN General Secretary in charge of political matters, U.S. citizen James Friedel, gave instructions on the attitude for the war in Syria, and it was the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, who revealed those instructions that were ignored by the members of the Security Council. And it included the fact that only when a true political transition negotiated by the parties will the United Nations be willing to facilitate the reconstruction. Let's talk about the role of this organization. The Friends of Syria understand from going from an independent, sovereign country, an anti-imperialist, a pan-Arab, progressive country, to be a French protectorate as it was in the mid-20th century. That kind of transition will never take place because the people, the Syrian people, with the giant efforts in life and blood, has defended its sovereignty, as I said, at a very high price. So United Nations were neutralized as a war actor, basically by the veto that has both China and Russia have presented in the UN Security Council. But I don't see a positive role of the United Nations when there have been representatives for Syrian cases that have been defending an incorrect policy of sanctions. They have been unable to stop European Union sanctions against Syria, approved at the time when the terrorist wave of Al-Qaeda, mercenary wave, attacked the sovereignty of Syria. So we would have to reflect on the role that the UN system has had, because it was the Astana negotiations with the intervention of Russia and Turkey and Iran that progressed in peace scenarios, and not the Geneva conversations where Western powers participate in the United Nations. We must review the United Nations role that has not stopped the war plans and has not approached peace that has been achieved in the field. I want to go back with Firas Al-Charani. What are the most important challenges for 2019 that is about to start? We were saying that the return of the refugees, the process of national reconciliation, the reactivation of economy and life in general. What are the perspectives for next year? United Nations, we must always remember three important things. They were always to the service of imperialism. They control it and manipulate it according to their interests. We're not talking about Venezuela, what they're clear. But if we talk about the war in Iraq in 2003, in the war of massive destruction, everybody in the Committee on Investigation of Chemical Weapons, and they proved there was nothing. the General Secretary of United Nations at the time, who carried out the investigation, didn't say anything, or just when they were out of office, they said that this was just a game. The attacks of chemical weapons in the north of Syria, just when the Commission arrived to investigate, 2 days before, there was an attack perpetrated by the same terrorists. Everything was a drama, and they refused to investigate because they weren't interested. So United Nations have always played the role it has to play in the hands of imperialism, undoubtedly. While the seat is in New York, there's nothing to do, of course, and this is what we have. What concerns the Syrian people today are 3 important things. In the military, the most important, of course, besides the construction that will arrive to zones controlled by the government and the army, but the army is very important. While Russia is at the political level trying to make the Turkish understand that there is no other alternative than to lead in the zone, Islamic Party, they are all foreigners brought from abroad. Of course, the military topic is the most important, and there will not be another topic until Syria is freed. The rest will be very easy because Syrians are prepared with no foreign mediation. We have no problem in discussing inside in Parliament, and we will have free elections with a constitution without leaving any void that will allow any tendency. But the most important in 2019 will be to conduct to free the province of Idlib and take Israel out. And we will see that we will soon have the capacity of stopping any Israeli attack in Syria and our territory. This is something the reconstruction of the country that has already started. And I hope that 2019, that Libya will be freed, and the U.S. will notice that they will have to leave from Syria. They should prepare their wooden boxes. They also have experience in the south of Lebanon, 1982, and many other places. In Syria, we will not allow them to stay, not in good or bad conditions. And Syrian president said it, and our UN delegate, you leave in good conditions or in bad conditions. So we have good perspectives. We still have a hard year because it's not going to be easy. Thank you for combining both questions. I would like to thank both of you, Algida Zaltarán and Professor José Antonio Ejido. We will now go to our conclusions based on what we have learned in this space. Gathering of actors in the international arena, the United States that destroyed its entire societies through different methods to take over resources and control world places for which it represents. Libya, with great discrepancies of power, it is interested in extending the war because they don't want to admit their defeat, because many things have happened. Syria has made strategies that made possible defeating those terrorists and mercenaries, curing deep wounds, joint construction with an indisputable leader of Russia is evident. The Russian Federation is reducing its presence while Syrian forces are being strengthened. Damascus says that it is 15 minutes from the final victory. We will see what the lords of the war are willing to do to stop, and the United Nations will have to revise its policy because it's not interested in stopping war. And yes, the peace in the region, it depends on the peace in Syria, although the lords of the war will keep inventing these strategies. We conclude Critical Mood today. Thank you for being with us.